Surprisingly, if you appeal to tired and worn out people, it might just reflect in your own work. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Mere Mortals Book Reviews. Kyron here, live on the 12th of February 2025. And as you might surmise, this is the podcast where I give you swimming techniques. No, it's not the podcast. And you're probably not going to find it in here, even though you might think you would, in Blue Ocean Strategy by W. Chan Kim and Renée Mauborgne. Mauborgne is, I guess, how you would pronounce that name. Now, this book was published in 2005, but I have the 2015 revised edition, I guess, what you'd call it, which has an extra chapter or two. It's 261 pages in length, 5 to 6 hours reading in total. It's pretty thick with the actual content that's contained within this. Now, this is a business strategy book promoting the idea of this blue ocean strategy, which is essentially a call to find greener pastures for your business, for your market that you're in, and to stop floundering in this competitive strategy of the red ocean, which is where it's kind of like dog eat dog, shark eat shark, I guess is what you'd call it, and move to this blue ocean of better pastures. I'm not sure why they didn't use something like green pasture strategy. This probably would have been better. It highlights the several companies that they believe who have done this, and actually there's quite a few companies, and why they were successful. You'll find within here plenty of like graphs and just general, techniques, bullet points, lists, tables. There's all sorts of things that you'll find within here, which are all going to try and demonstrate their point of what is a blue ocean strategy. So there's also 3 appendices. There's 11 chapters, and they go by the names of things, split into 3 parts. Part 1, Blue Ocean Strategy, creating blue oceans, analytical tools and frameworks. Part 2, formulating blue ocean strategy, reconstruct market boundaries, reach beyond existing demand, get the strategic sequence right. Part 3, executing blue ocean strategy, align value, profit, people, and propositions. All business talk, all very, very good. So let's jump into some of the themes and questions here. And so blue ocean strategy is essentially a mindset shift, I guess. It's technically probably a strategic shift in a company. If you're feeling the pressure of tightening costs, if your growth is slow, if you're tired, if everything just feels like it's harder than it needs to be, perhaps you're not thinking right and you need to start investigating, a blue ocean strategy. I need to change what my business and is doing and address a new market. And essentially, it's all about unlocking demand that wasn't there before. You're going for a market which does not exist, and so therefore you can be the only and sole competitor within it. It's mostly applied, I guess, or talking to companies that are or perhaps like executives that are already in this, rather than addressing it to startups, for example. I got the feeling this was more for like, hey, you're already in knee deep. I'm going to be crisscrossing analogies here, but you're already knee deep into the weeds, and you're floundering there, or you're struggling through that jungle. And I guess maybe the ocean version of this would be you're in the kelp. You can't escape the kelp, and you're trying to get out of that. And so there's quite a few things that it lists off. So for example, red ocean strategy, so this is what you're probably already doing, is competing in existing market space. You're trying to beat the competition. You're trying to exploit existing demand. There's making value cost trade-offs and things like this. Whereas blue ocean strategy is more about creating uncontested market space. You're making the competition irrelevant, so you're not competing. Create and capture new demand, break the value cost trade-off, etc., etc. And some of the probably like most useful things I think in this were, if you were to compare yourself visually in a company, and you'll see on the screen here, you've got a graph which is just showing low, average, high of whatever it is that you're measuring. So it could be cost of your product, it could be the ease of access, the a technical detail that you do better or don't do as good as your competition, and you kind of measure yourself and see where you rank up and where your competition does. And so you might find, okay, they're better at some points, I'm better at low points. And basically, it's the strategy is to eliminate some things which are unhelpful, unuseful. Your customers don't actually need it, even though you might think they do. To reduce some things which are perhaps adding cost to your product or making it harder to use. You want to raise some things which are neglected by the current system, by the current market, and isn't being addressed. And then probably most importantly, to create new metrics for yourself to go, okay, this is what we're going to try and focus on, etc., etc. The examples given in this book are ones like Cirque du Soleil, which revamped the idea of a circus instead of being this kind of place where you'd go to see animals, and it didn't really have a theme. It was more about like this crazy jovial thing, whereas Cirque du Soleil is more like, unique handcrafted music experience, costumes, getting rid of these star performers and focusing more on the show as a whole rather than as a, the amazing Atsupata or something like that, and completely eliminating animals from the performance, making it more like an operatic type experience to go to rather than a theme park type deal. We have Yellowtail Wines, which are actually an Aussie company, which made the wine industry shift, or their entrance into it was from this kind of sophisticated prestige wine market where if you're a new person coming in, it's so hard to like know, and it's very snobbery, whereas this was more about like the party, the fun atmosphere of being able to just have a social drink with friends type deal, and that's why they were successful. NetJets, which was a shared private aviation company, so sharing private planes, and even strategies of like the New York Police Department, so not technically a company, but how they addressed certain things related to crime and stuff, and compared themselves to other cities and said, okay, we're going to do this better, we're not going to do this, etc., etc. And then even perhaps even industries, how they changed. The experience of going to a movie changed with Nickelodeons, with multiplexes, then megaplexes, and then I guess even nowadays you'd call it streaming. And so Netflix, I'm sure they would have said, had a blue ocean strategy. So the meta thought process of all this, I think, is rather solid. Playing a zero-sum game is rather hard, and only suited for competitors who really like to defeat other people, who love the grind, who love pulling one over, of creating, getting your market share higher, or beating someone out by like pure just like grit and holding on and working hard for dear life. I think this book is meant to appeal to more, I'm not going to say the lazy, but the people who are tired of that, who are just like, I'm putting all this energy in and it's not really having effects. I don't want to compete in this game. And hence why people like Tim Ferriss recommend this book. And it certainly appeals to me, this idea of, I'd rather compete against myself or in an arena where it's just me rather than against other people, because, sure, I'm like lazy and tired. I don't want to like grind away on, one particular metric of value cost averaging or whatever just to do something like that, even though I'm not in business. So that appeals to me. The whole meta idea of blue ocean strategy, sure, that's cool. What I personally have a problem with is that I just kept thinking while reading, this is probably a poor tool for actual prediction and kind of for execution as well. The vast bulk of the book is taken up with like formulating the strategy, visualizing strategy at the corporate level, and it's got all of these things like key competing factors, the defense aerospace industry, and then it's got like all of these tables and graphs and talking about this stuff, and it's very like flow charts and lists and things like this, and the 6 utility levers, and whilst reading, I'm just like, okay, maybe this is how companies and businesses work. Maybe this is what like the meetings at the ultimate high level of CEOs and CFOs and stuff and things like that is like. I've never been there. I can't speak for that. But I'm just going like, man, it's kind of like the blue ocean strategy is just a mindset shift. That's really all I got from this. Is like, you need to change your mindset. Here's a couple of like rough tools of how you could go about doing it. But honestly, I think if it's more about, the whole book is more about just trying to get into a CEO's head that, oh shit, we're competing in this market, and it's really hard, and our business is going to struggle, and we're going to spend a lot of energy running around. It's kind of like the Red Queen, running as hard as you can to just stay in the same place, sort of deal. So I think the real money comes from, the real value would be from probably just diving into one company and going like, okay, why did they make this decision rather than this decision? Because it didn't seem great in terms of the executing of things. My co-host Juan, he can come up with 100 business ideas, and he does all the time. Yet he'll only choose maybe one of them to actually act upon. And it would be much more interesting to have a book of, okay, listing out the other 99 ideas and why he only chose to act upon this one. So they keep talking about the corporate graveyards of companies that failed to adapt or did the transition poorly to blue ocean. Yet all of this feels very, very like hindsight type deal. I would hazard a guess that there would be many times that they would, if a company came to them and said like, hey, we're doing this thing, blue ocean strategy, and they'd be like, the authors of this would be like, yeah, you're nailing it. This blue ocean strategy is you're on the right path. Yet it just feels very, very like unmetric based, a very qualitative, like these people are doing blue ocean strategy, but these people who failed didn't do it. And it just feels very, very cherry picked, rather than something that's a practical thing that you can really use going forward. A reason for why I say this as well is the kind of cavalier nature in which they use the blue ocean strategy. So for example, at one point they suggest that the Sex and the City show was a blue ocean strategy because it addressed the market of, I don't know, like female single people or something like this. Does that mean every popular TV show is a blue ocean strategy? Like, it seems like a rather unfalsifiable theory in terms. So if I was going to say it about this book, blue ocean strategy, yeah, sure, the idea is solid, but I would not be looking to this for any competency or anything that you could be saying like, yeah, this will really help in terms of execution for your particular market, for the nuances that go on with that. Let's jump into the author, perhaps some extra details, authors, I should say. So W. Chan Kim and Renée Mauborgne are business people who just happened to write a book. So this was published by the Harvard Business School. They were more lecturers and / teachers, from what I can gather. Worked at the place called INSEAD, which was, I thought was an acronym for something, and it was, but actually wasn't. And we'll get into why this is kind of important in a little bit. There's nothing particularly wrong with them not being authors, and they've written a couple of books, but they're all, Blue Ocean Strategy Revisited or Blue Ocean Traps or whatever. So there's variation books on this. So I'm given a bit of leeway here in that they're not writers. They're business people, and the book is undoubtedly successful and popular. So kudos to them for writing a book that managed to gain a lot of traction. Me personally, it's hard to pick out exactly why I disliked the style of this book. It felt wordy in a kind of businessy way. So there seemed to be a lot of unnecessary sentences to drive home a point or to restate a statement in a slightly different form. It didn't feel like it felt like this had been written once, and like then they just chucked it out, perhaps cleaned up a couple of words here and there, and then put it out. It didn't feel like it had multiple revisions of them reading over and going, okay, this point here, can I get this across more succinctly? Does it need to be written this way, as wordy as this way? So I would argue that there was a lot of low value repetitive nature in this book, and this was kind of just a filler of supplementary talk that didn't actually help prove or put their strategy into place. Particularly noticeable of this was I'd kind of appreciate the bits about companies where they would say, okay, this company, for example, this company does this company does this. But then in the pieces of actual business, I definitely saw my mind wandering, and I certainly was speed reading towards the end of this book. Once again, That's okay. You know, many of the companies in this are somewhat outdated. This book's 20 years old now, and the references, you know, they talk about things like how Dyson revolutionized the vacuum industry by getting rid of the paper bags. And I'm like, oh yeah, shit, I remember that. Like just barely vaguely in my mind, I remember reading that. So, you know, there's a little bit of outdated stuff. Once again, they're not authors. I can give that a bit of a pass. I can forgive them this. But what is unforgivable is one of the wildest things I've ever seen in a book, which occurs on both page 14 and then on page 38. So if you'll bear with me here, I'm going to read out this section here. So, where should I start? Cirque du Soleil did away with all of these factors. These factors had long been taken for granted in the traditional circus industry, which never questioned their ongoing relevance. However, there was increasing public discomfort with the use of animals. Moreover, animal acts were one of the most expensive elements, including not only the cost of the animals, but also their training, medical care, housing, insurance, and transportation. Similarly, while the circus industry focused on featuring stars, in the mind of the public, the so-called stars of the circus were trivial next to movie stars or famous singers. Again, they were a high-cost component carrying little sway with spectators, gone to other three-ring venues. Okay, you know what? That's not too bad. That's kind of interesting. Shows me something that I didn't know about the circus industry beforehand. That, okay, there's something in this book, and this is why Cirque du Soleil did well. Now, we come on to this section over here on page 38. In the case of Cirque du Soleil, it eliminated several factors from traditional circuses, such as the animal shows, star performers, and multiple show arenas. These factors had long been taken for granted in the traditional circus industry, which never questioned their ongoing relevance. However, there was increasing public discomfort with the use of animals. Moreover, animal acts are one of the most expensive elements. Not only is there the cost of the animals, but also their training, medical care, housing, insurance, and transportation. Similarly, although the circus industry focused on featuring stars, in the mind of the public, the so-called stars of the circus were trivial next to movie stars or famous singers. Again, they were a high-cost component carrying little sway with spectators, gone to three-ring venues. Are you fucking kidding me? What kind of shithouse larkery is this? So this is what? Page 14 to 38. So that is 24 pages away from each other. They have taken the exact same paragraph and this is the kicker. The exact same paragraph and then altered a word here or there. So it's like they put in the or changed this comma from this place or added, you know, the Cirque du Soleil. The first time, so reading through, I came to this page 38 and I'm just like, wait, that seems really familiar. Like, and because it was right at the start of the book, I could go back and I'm like, oh, maybe I read it in the appendices because they referenced an appendix. So I went back to read that first. But no, it's in the actual meat of the book where they copy the same fucking thing and then just put it in. And that's a full paragraph and a half just there. I'm flabbergasted. I have never seen such, I don't know what to call this, like lousy, tired, just stupid copy editing where you have posted the exact same. What value did that add by not only copying it, but then just changing a word here or there? Sumimasen, what the fuck? What the actual fuck? And this wasn't just a one-off, because now that I was looking for this, I was like, okay, I didn't know what to think. Like, what is this? So then, as I'm reading, and as I mentioned, like I read the appendix, and then I went back, and they did the exact same thing on the Model T, page 132, and then on Appendix A. They do the exact same fucking thing, right down to changing a word here or there. I didn't know what to think of this, other than how do you write a book? Like, was this in the original written like this? You know, I thought they only added an extra chapter into this book, the chapter 10 on like red ocean traps. So did they do this in the original version as well? Is this book somehow different or special? How did they intentionally do that? And if they intentionally did that, what were they thinking? There's a couple of other things that I started to notice in here. For example, in chapter 10, they just start randomly using the word per se, and not just a little, a lot. They'll use it twice in one paragraph, 3 times on one page. It's just like they just started discovering that per se is a fun thing to say, and then just randomly just start dropping it in everywhere. I mentioned the InSeed, which was right at the start, talking about the authors and co-director of the InSeed Blue Ocean Strategy, and InSeed is all capitalized, so I assumed that stood for something, like Institute of something. And sure enough, it does, but it's kind of like this weird... It feels like they should have just put in the old name of it, which was a French word, Institut des Arts, something, education, whatever it was. There was just a whole bunch of points in this book where I'm just going, this is just really lousy. This is really tired. This is really lazy. And I'm not on board with that. I'm really not on board with that. So jumping to the summary, similar books, recommendations. The fundamental idea of this book is fine. Blue Ocean Strategy, cool. Stop competing in a heavily competitive market. It's not worth the effort. I'm down with that. Calling way for a new way of looking at things for stagnating companies. In terms of actionable advice, if I was an executive, I'd probably wouldn't be able to take anything away from this, other than like, okay, yeah, you know what? We need to start thinking about these things. A couple of the graphs of like, yeah, this is how you can compare things might be helpful. But in terms of the actual book, sloppy and lazy writing. I can only imagine, this is why at the start I was referencing, like, if you're appealing to perhaps some like tired and sloppy people, maybe that reflects in your own work, because this just seems sloppy and tired. I'm surprised this book has done as well as it has. Funny little thing on the back here. It's got like 3 stars. I'm not sure why you'd put that on the back of your own book, even if it's just for a design thing. You'd probably think that you'd put 5 stars. And this, I think, is emblematic of this book, because giving this 3 stars out of 10 is generous at best. This is easily forgettable, and I hope we will never have to mention this book again. A solid 1.5 out of 10. Blue Ocean Strategy. W. Kim Renée Mauborgne. I'm unforgivable that passage that just completely ruined this book of any value it has. Similar books, I don't know. This book, I feel like it wishes it was a long tail. If you want a business book that we've covered on this channel, The Long Tail by Chris Anderson, it's similar in style. It's not appealing to executives. It's more just explaining a concept. And I think they would have done much better if they had followed that style of saying, this is what a blue ocean strategy is, and not writing it in the sense of trying to... It was just very businessy speak. But, the book's done successfully for them, so kudos to them. Maybe I'm just a hater. Let's jump on to the final sections here. Value for value. I hope I'm providing more value to you than I got from this book. This podcast is available anytime, anywhere for anyone. And I just ask that for all this value that I'm providing up front, if you can return some in kind. Now, you can do this many ways: time, sharing this, creating clips from this, jumping up onto any of our social media platforms. All these sorts of things are very helpful. Talent, I would love to hear your book recommendations, what you think I would enjoy, not enjoy, your thoughts on this particular book, adding something to the conversation. It's very much appreciated. Come join us in the Discord for that, or leave a comment on the YouTube. And then finally, we do have some ways for you to support monetarily. The main one I talk about is the PayPal link, but we also do have a special little thing you can do, which is called a boostergram. And you can send this through on a select podcasting apps like True Fans and Fountain. And we got a couple of messages coming in from Lyceum, who was sending in some stuff for us. And he says, here's a book review. Here is a review of your book review. Cool beans. And he was listening to The Man Who Was Thursday, G.K. Chesterton, from last week. He says, I'm going to listen to this book on Audible. Thanks for the book tip. I've watched some episodes of the Fader Brown TV series. So I believe that is based on the other books by Mr. G.K. Chesterton. And he says, talking about books, have you read Ayn Rand's favorite novel, Calumet K? And he sends in a Magna Carta boost of 1,215 Satoshis. Super comment by Martin Lindeskog, Lyceum at truefans.fm. Thank you very much, Mr. Martin Lindiscove's Lyceum. I have not read that book by Anne Rand's favorite novel, so it's not a book by her. I know he's very much a fan of the Ayn Rand's literature in general. So I have read The Fountainhead. I have read Atlas Shrugged. I didn't mind them. Atlas Shrugged was a bit long for my liking. I probably enjoyed The Fountainhead a bit more. It does have that slight feel of propaganda to it rather than artistic work. It's kind of like a mix between the two. And the all-out, I can't remember what her style of philosophy is. I think it's Ayn Randism, to be honest. Is a bit much for me, but I have not read that. I'll look into that, Calumet K. So thank you very much for the recommendation. I'll have a look into it. And finally, here we are live as usual, 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on a Wednesday. What I'm saying is going to have to catch up on the replay to check the heat, because it has turned into a slightly longer one. I thought I'd get this a little bit off shorter. And he was in the chat, and I did stuff up a couple of times at the start. So if you join in live, you get to see the stuff ups, the meat behind how these podcasts are produced. And that was kind of funny. So yeah, very much appreciated if you can join me for those. I'm going to be continuing that for the foreseeable future until I start traveling in probably May. Juan will also be coming out with some book reviews shortly. I know he's, as I mentioned, read the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Next up, coming for me, will be The Lucky Country by Donald Horn. I'm making my way through The Gilded Age by Mark Twain. And I also have I think it's called The Price of Interest or The Price of Time, by Edward Chancellor, because I very much loved his book of Devil Take the Hindmost. So I'm jumping onto his, which is all about interest rates and things like this. So usury, if you want to know about that, which will be coming up. So thanks very much for joining in. I really hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are in the world. Ciao for now. Karen out. Bye.